My mom forced me to donate my kidney. My stepbrother laughed that I was just spare parts. They took my future, my career, and my savings, but I exposed them and made sure they were the ones left begging. Hey, Reddit. My family always treated me like I was just spare parts for my stepbrother. I tried to live my own life and walk away, but they had other plans. Before I explain how everything blew up, let me start from the beginning. My name's Josh Carter. I'm 24, born and raised in Chicago, and for the first time in my life, I was about to get out. After years of dead-end jobs and night classes, I'd landed a position with a tech startup in Seattle. A real career, decent money, and a chance to build something of my own. The offer letter was signed, my flight was booked, and I had 6 weeks to get my life packed into boxes. The only thing standing between me and that future was the house I still lived in, and the people inside it. My mom, Elaine, was the kind of woman who needed to be needed. After my dad died when I was 14, she built her whole world around keeping control. When she remarried a few years later, that instinct only grew sharper. Martin, her new husband, was a smug real estate developer who treated every conversation like a negotiation. And then there was Tyler, Martin's 19-year-old son, a human hangnail with a trust fund. Tyler had never worked a day in his life. He spent his days gaming, partying, and posting motivational quotes online about grind culture. He called me 9 to 5 because I actually had to earn a paycheck. Every time I walked through the door, he had some snide comment ready, usually followed by a request for me to grab him a soda. Martin wasn't much better. "You're lucky to have a roof over your head," he reminded me weekly, even though I paid rent. According to him, I owed them gratitude for letting me stay while I got my career together. Elaine always nodded along, like it was a fact instead of an insult. Still, I tried not to care. My job offer was a countdown clock, and soon I'd be 2,000 miles away from their nonsense. I was so close I could feel the rain in Seattle. Then, one Wednesday afternoon, everything went sideways. Tyler collapsed during a workout. One second he was recording himself deadlifting for his followers. The next he was on the floor, pale and sweating. Martin called an ambulance. Elaine cried like she'd been shot. The hospital smelled like bleach and bad news. Tyler wasn't dying on the table. He was stabilized and hooked to machines I didn't have names for. A nephrologist sat us down and used a word I'd only heard on TV: dialysis. "His kidneys have failed," she said. "Dialysis keeps him alive while we figure out long-term options. The best outcome is a transplant, but that's elective and depends on testing, matching, and clearance. That takes weeks. Weeks." Martin heard weeks and translated it to "drag your feet and he dies." Elaine just looked at me. They tested the family first. Martin, his ex-wife, a handful of cousins. No matches. I wasn't planning to get tested. Tyler and I weren't close, and the idea barely crossed my mind. But Elaine insisted. "It's just a blood test," she said, her tone making it clear I didn't have a choice. A day after the blood draw, a coordinator pulled me into a glass-walled office. "You're a potential match," he said, like I'd won a prize. "That means more tests. HLA typing, imaging, cross-match, and meetings with an independent living donor advocate. Nothing happens without your clear, voluntary consent. You can say no at any point." Martin exhaled like paperwork had just cured Tyler. Elaine squeezed my arm. Tyler grinned from the bed. None of them heard the word voluntary. I did. Elaine looked at me with watery eyes. The kind that didn't ask a question, just assumed an answer. The donor advocate, Ilda, they called her, popped in for maybe 10 minutes. "Do you feel pressured by anyone?" she asked. My mother was sitting right there. "I'm thinking," I said. ALDA nodded, clicked a box on her tablet, and handed me a brochure about how donors can walk away at any time. Later, I'd learn her note read, "No coercion reported. Donor eager to proceed." I never said eager. Elaine didn't speak, but her face said it all. "Don't you dare say no." I left the hospital feeling like I'd been shoved into a corner. My phone buzzed. Marcus, my best friend since high school, checking in. I didn't tell him everything yet, just that things at home were complicated. He told me not to let anyone guilt-trip me. "It's your body," he said. "Don't let them decide for you." I wanted to believe I still had a choice. But when I got home that night, Elaine was waiting in the living room with dinner, candles, and the fake warmth she always used when she wanted something. "We're so proud of you," she said before I even sat down. "Your father would be too." I didn't respond. My dad's name was her favorite weapon. Martin joined in. "You're doing the right thing. Family looks out for family." I stared at the plate of lasagna in front of me and said nothing. The walls felt like they were closing in. Upstairs, I stared at the Seattle job offer pinned above my desk. I'd earned every inch of that future. and now it felt like it was slipping away piece by piece. The next few weeks blurred into lab draws and scans. Tyler did dialysis 3 times a week. Every beep of his pump was a metronome for the guilt they fed me. Pamphlets on living heroes. Martin's lectures about family sacrifices. Elaine's weaponized nostalgia about my dad. Doctors kept saying the same thing. A living donor transplant is scheduled. Sooner is better for quality of life, but it isn't an emergency. Somehow my family only heard sooner. I told myself I still had time to decide, but deep down, I knew the decision might already be made, and I wasn't the one making it. Der Marcus showed up at the house 2 days after the hospital visit with 2 coffees and a look that said he already knew too much. He was one of those friends who didn't dance around anything. "So, kidney boy," he said, handing me a cup. "You gonna do it?" I shook my head. "I haven't decided." He stared at me for a moment. "No, you have decided. You just don't think you're allowed to say it." I told him everything. The hospital visit, the way Martin scoffed, Tyler's smug grin, the way Mom didn't even ask, just assumed. Marcus listened quietly, jaw tight. "Josh, that's not a decision," he said. "That's a setup. They're not going to stop until they get what they want, and they're going to make you feel like a villain if you don't give it to them." I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew he was right. The pressure started small. Pamphlets about hero donors appeared on the kitchen counter. They had smiling faces and bold slogans. 1 kidney, 1 life saved. Elaine left them everywhere. On my desk, by the bathroom sink, inside my lunch bag. Martin became a broken record. Family sacrifices for family. He'd drop it into casual conversation over breakfast, as if it were a universal truth. Even Tyler joined in. One afternoon, he posted a GoFundMe page titled, "Help Save My Life." My photo was front and center, smiling from a vacation years ago. The caption read, "My brother Josh is our only hope. He's stepping up to give me a second chance." I hadn't agreed to anything. I confronted him immediately. "Take that down." He shrugged. "Relax. It's just to raise awareness." Awareness of what? That I'm doing something I never said I'd do? Tyler didn't look up from his phone. "Don't be dramatic. Everyone's proud of you." I'd already missed 2 onboarding webinars because of hospital appointments, and my paperwork sat in my inbox like a dare. The next week, my future called. Literally. The HR rep from Seattle asked if I could confirm my start date so they could book my relocation package. I told them I needed a little more time. The hesitation in her voice told me I'd already pushed it too far. That night, Elaine hosted a dinner party. The house was filled with her friends from church and Martin's business partners. Halfway through dessert, Elaine stood and tapped her glass. "We're so grateful for the love and support," she said. "Our family's been through so much, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Josh here," she gestured at me, "is stepping up in the most selfless way imaginable. He's giving his brother the gift of life." The room erupted in applause. I wanted to disappear. I hadn't agreed to anything, but now it felt like the whole city thought I had. After they left, I cornered her in the kitchen. "Why would you say that?" "Because it's true," she said, rinsing plates. "It's not. I haven't made a decision." She froze, turned, and gave me a look I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. Disappointment disguised as sadness. "You have made a decision. You're just afraid to say it out loud." "No," I said, louder than I meant to. "I'm afraid you won't hear me if I say no." The room went cold. "Your father would never forgive you for walking away from this," she said softly. "Neither will I." That night, the pressure boiled over. I told them all, Elaine, Martin, and Tyler, that I wasn't doing it. Not now. Maybe not ever. Elaine burst into tears. "How can you be so cruel? Do you want your brother to die?" Martin leaned forward, voice low and sharp. "If you back out now, don't expect a single cent from us. No help, no safety net. You'll be on your own." "Fine," I said. "I never asked for your money." Tyler laughed from the couch. Spare parts trying to act tough. I stared at him, fists clenched. "I'm not your donor. I'm not your solution. I'm not your anything." "Then I guess you're nothing," he muttered. The argument spiraled. Elaine brought up my dad again, claiming I was disgracing his memory. Martin accused me of being jealous of Tyler's potential. Tyler taunted me with jokes about how his followers were already calling me a hero. "Don't ruin the story now." By the end, my head was spinning. I stormed out before I said something I couldn't take back. Marcus answered on the first ring when I called. "Let me guess," he said. "They lost it." "They're out of their minds," I said. "It's like they've decided I don't have a say in my own body." "Then make them hear you," he said. "And if they won't, walk away." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But every time I pictured Tyler hooked up to those machines, every time I heard my mom's voice saying your father would be ashamed, doubt crawled back in. They were breaking me down piece by piece, and part of me was starting to wonder if that was the plan all along. The email hit my inbox just after sunrise. Employment status update. 2 lines. We regret to inform you that we are rescinding our offer. No explanation. A recruiter I trusted called me after hours. Off the record, she said, someone phoned HR claiming you were about to be out for major surgery. They got spooked. She didn't say Martin. She didn't have to. When I got home, Martin was in the kitchen drinking coffee like nothing had happened. You called my job, I said. I told them the truth, he replied calmly. You're going to be out of commission. Better they hear it now than after they waste money training you. You killed my chance to get out, he smirked. I saved you from abandoning your family. I stormed upstairs, trying to think of a way out. A day later, Elaine made sure I didn't have one. She drained the savings account my dad left me, claiming it was for Tyler's emergency care. It's a family crisis, Josh, she said when I confronted her. That money is saving your brother's life. It was my money. It was our money. And it's doing more good now than sitting in a bank. That night, I checked my credit. It had dropped almost 200 points. Cards had been opened in my name months earlier, already 90 days late. The billing address is traced back to Martin's office suite. If you try to report this, he said, I'll tell the police you were in on it. You'll go down for fraud, not me. Marcus was furious when I told him. You have to go to the cops. They'll bury me, I said. He's made sure of it. No job, no savings, no credit. And if I get arrested, they'll say I was avoiding donating. Martin made sure even practical escape routes were blocked. Landlords suddenly wouldn't return my calls. One quietly told me Martin had called, warning them I was financially unstable. I was still on their plan, technically, but Martin controlled the logins and the authorizations. Claims started bouncing. Pharmacies said my coverage was inactive pending verification. I spent hours on hold learning how much coverage means when the gatekeeper wants you locked out. A week later, Martin delivered the final blow. If you run, I'll report you for fraud and swear you were in on it, he said. If you go public, I'll sue for defamation. If Tyler dies, you'll live with that blood on your hands. Then the doctor called. Tyler's kidneys were deteriorating faster than expected. If we don't schedule a transplant soon, he said, it may be too late. How long? I asked. Every day matters, he said carefully. Elaine twisted those words into a countdown. He could have days, Josh. Days. I asked about other donors, clinical trials, alternatives. Every option would take too long. According to them, I was the only shot. Then came the paperwork. We just need the evaluation consent form signed so we can schedule tests, the coordinator said. You can always withdraw later. I signed it, thinking I could back out if I changed my mind. 5 weeks in, a coordinator called, all clear on your workup. If you choose to proceed, the first available elective slot is next Thursday. That afternoon, Elaine announced to a room full of church friends that I was saving my brother next week. And by dinner, I was a hero again in everyone's mouth but my own. Pre-op smelled like warmed blankets and dry mouths. A nurse read the risks. The surgeon explained the plan. The clipboard landed in my hands like a verdict. You can stop at any time, he said, the way you tell someone they can leave a building with the fire alarms screaming. Elaine's fingers dug into my shoulder. Martin stood in the doorway, arms crossed, already texting people the good news. I signed. Then they gave me something for the nerves, and the room softened at the edges. Somewhere between the sting in my IV and the mask lowering over my face, I tried to remember the pamphlet line about how donors could always walk away. No one asked if I wanted to. The last thing I remember before the darkness took over was the surgeon's voice. We're going to save your brother's life. When I woke up, the room was quiet and cold. My mouth was dry. My side burned with deep, aching pain. A nurse noticed my eyes open and smiled. It went perfectly, she said. Tyler's in recovery. He's stable. I stared at the ceiling, barely breathing. The optional part was a story. My shaky signature made it tidy. They never dragged me. They just closed every exit until yes was the only door left. The door swung open. Elaine rushed in with tears in her eyes and a bouquet in her hands. You saved him, she said breathlessly. You saved your brother. Martin followed with that same smug, satisfied expression he always wore when things went his way. The surgeon said the match was ideal. He's already improving. I stared at the ceiling, refusing to speak. Elaine brushed my hair back like I was 5 years old. You're a hero, Josh. Your father would be so proud. Tyler visited later, walking into the room like nothing had happened. He was pale but smiling. already on his phone. "We did it, man," he said. "Guess I owe you one." He didn't look me in the eye when he said it. Hours later, he uploaded a video from his hospital bed. It was a polished, emotional speech thanking my amazing brother for saving his life. It went viral overnight. Hashtag Hero Brother trended on social media. News outlets picked it up. People I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me with congratulations. None of them knew the truth. The following week, Elaine organized what she called a celebration of life dinner. I told her I wasn't up for it, but she insisted. "Everyone wants to thank you," she said. "It'll mean a lot to Tyler." The house was full again, but colder this time. Phones out, a quick prayer, a few staged photos for the church newsletter. I was a backdrop with stitches. I barely spoke. My body felt like it was shutting down. Standing too long made me dizzy. Food tasted like cardboard. All I wanted was to go home and lie down. But Elaine kept dragging people over to meet me. "He's always been so selfless," she said proudly. "Just like his father." I excused myself early and went upstairs. Marcus called that night, furious when I told him what happened. "They're parading you around like a trophy," he said. "You need to go to the police." "For what?" I asked. "I signed the forms." I said yes. "Under duress," he shot back. "That's coercion. You didn't have a choice." But Martin's threats still echoed in my head. If I pushed this, he'd bury me under fraud charges. And who would believe me now? The whole city thought I was a hero. Recovery was worse than I expected. The doctor said I'd be back to normal in a few weeks. But I wasn't. I was exhausted all the time. My skin was pale, my weight dropped, and some days even walking up the stairs left me breathless. I tried applying for jobs, but with my medical history flagged, no one was eager to hire me. I didn't have health insurance anymore, and paying for follow-up care was impossible. I spiraled into debt almost immediately. Tyler bounced back fast. 2 months later, he was out with friends again. Selfies from bars and parties, the kind his doctors told him to avoid while immunosuppressed. He didn't care. Every time I saw his face on a screen, I felt sick. Once, he showed up at my door unannounced with a gift bag. A pair of expensive headphones. "Just a little thank you," he said, as if that erased everything. I shut the door without taking them. Elaine and Martin's attitudes shifted once Tyler was stable. The endless praise dried up, replaced by subtle dismissiveness. When I mentioned my exhaustion, Elaine told me I needed to toughen up. When I struggled to keep food down, Martin suggested I was exaggerating for attention. "Everyone gets tired after surgery," he said. "You'll be fine." I wasn't fine. Some mornings I couldn't even get out of bed. I skipped meals because I couldn't afford groceries. I stopped answering calls from friends because I didn't have the energy to explain. Weeks later, I finally pried a copy of my chart out of medical records. The ILDA note said, "No coercion." The consent was time-stamped 22 minutes before pre-medication. Technically valid, ethically disgusting. A single line on the day of surgery read, "Donor affirms voluntary consent." Voluntary? Sure. With my mother crying in the doorway and my life already detonated. I stared at that sentence for a long time. All the rage, humiliation, and helplessness I'd buried started to boil. Martin's connections kept me off most rental lists, but Marcus found a place through a friend willing to overlook my credit. He signed as guarantor, and I finally had a door that was mine. Marcus called again that night. "You're not powerless," he said. "Start documenting everything. Texts, emails, social media posts. Get copies of every record you can. If you ever decide to fight this, you'll need evidence." So I did. I saved screenshots of Martin's threats. I archived Tyler's posts. I requested every hospital document I could get. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but for the first time since the surgery, I had a purpose. Somewhere beneath the exhaustion and bitterness, something new was forming. Not forgiveness. Not acceptance. Something sharper. I wasn't a hero, but I was done being their victim. The first real crack in their carefully built lie came on a Friday night in September. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through job boards I knew I had no chance with, when a news alert popped up on my phone. Local influencer arrested for DUI after crash. The picture was Tyler. Dazed, handcuffed, blood on his shirt. The article said he'd blown through a red light at twice the legal limit and T-boned another car. The driver was in critical condition. Within hours, the video hit social media. Tyler being shoved into a police cruiser, still drunk, shouting at officers to call my dad. Elaine called me the next morning, voice shaking. "The media's exaggerating," she said. "He's terrified. He needs support right now." "He almost killed someone," I said flatly. "He's going through trauma. You owe him compassion." That word, Oh, hit harder than it should have. After everything they'd taken from me, they still thought I owed them something. The story spread fast. Tyler's sponsors dropped him. His follower count plummeted. But what made me angriest wasn't what he did. It was Elaine's response. At a press conference outside the courthouse, she stood next to Martin and told reporters that Tyler's reckless behavior was the result of emotional neglect from a family member. Everyone knew who she meant. I sat in my apartment, watching her on TV, and felt something inside me snap. That night, I opened the folder I'd been building for months. Screenshots, bank statements, text messages, forged credit accounts, the GoFundMe posts, and the hospital paperwork. I called Marcus. "I'm done hiding," I said. He was silent for a moment. "You're going public?" "I'm going to burn everything they built." We spent the weekend putting it all together. Marcus knew a journalist who specialized in medical ethics and abuse cases. Dana Reyes, a reporter with a reputation for digging deep and not backing down. We met her in a cafe 2 blocks from my apartment. I laid it all out. How they sabotaged my job. How they drained my savings. How Martin opened accounts in my name and threatened me with charges. How they convinced me the surgery was optional, then cornered me with a false emergency. How they turned my consent into a PR campaign. Dana listened without interrupting, taking notes the entire time. "If even half of this checks out," she said, "it's explosive." "It all checks out," Marcus said. 3 weeks later, the article dropped. Headline: Inside a Family's Coercion, How a Chicago Man Was Forced to Donate His Kidney. It was long, detailed, and damning. Screenshots of Martin's threats, photos of forged accounts, medical records showing the evaluation consent, and the day of surgical consent timestamp. Even clips from Tyler's social media bragging about his new lease on life. The story spread like wildfire. Local news picked it up, then national outlets. Hashtags flipped from hashtag HeroBrother to hashtag Stolen Choice. Support groups for organ donors flooded my inbox with messages of solidarity. I filed a takedown on Tyler's fundraiser for using my photo without permission. It came down within a day. Screenshots lived on. Elaine called me that night, sobbing. "How could you do this to your family?" she cried. "I didn't do this," I said. "You did. You're ruining our lives. You ruined mine first." I hung up. The fallout was immediate. The hospital said they had self-reported to compliance and the state. The ILDA and the transplant coordinator were suspended pending review. The transplant program got a site visit. The medical board opened an inquiry into whether my consent was truly informed or just documented. Martin's company was hit with a wave of lawsuits and investor withdrawals. His partners distanced themselves publicly. A fraud investigation opened into the accounts he'd forged in my name. Elaine was forced to resign from her job at the nonprofit, where she'd been praised as a pillar of the community. Donors pulled funding after Dana's article quoted her own words back at her, how I owed my brother my kidney. Tyler's legal problems multiplied. The family of the crash victim filed a lawsuit, and prosecutors added aggravated DUI charges. His reputation was destroyed. The phone didn't stop ringing. Journalists wanted interviews. Activists asked me to speak at conferences. Law firms offered to represent me pro bono if I wanted to pursue a civil suit. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't the one trapped. They were. A week later, Elaine showed up at my door. She looked nothing like the woman I'd grown up with. Hair unkempt, makeup smudged, eyes bloodshot. "Please," she whispered. "You have to stop this." I didn't open the door. "No. Josh, we're losing everything." "Good." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I was trying to hold the family together. You destroyed it." I closed the door before she could answer. That night, I spoke to Dana again. "It's not over," she told me. "The state's attorney's office is reviewing potential charges. This could go criminal." I didn't know if I wanted that. Jail wouldn't fix what they'd done. It wouldn't give me my health back or my career, but it would mean they finally faced consequences. Marcus asked me over dinner what I wanted next. "To make sure they never do this to anyone else," I said, and I meant it. Over the next few weeks, more people came forward. A woman who said her parents coerced her into donating bone marrow to a sibling. A man whose wife had signed him up for a kidney swap program without his knowledge. A former hospital nurse who said she'd seen dozens of coerced donations brushed under the rug. The story had struck a nerve. Every time a new message arrived, every time someone thanked me for speaking out, the bitterness that had been eating me alive shifted into something else. Purpose. They had stolen my choice. Now I was stealing back my voice. The article didn't just destroy their reputation, it triggered an avalanche. Within 2 weeks, subpoenas started arriving at Martin and Elaine's doorstep. Fraud investigators traced the forged accounts back to Martin's office. Regulators escalated their inquiries. The transplant program was slated for a site visit, and my lawyers walked me through potential civil claims. I read every headline with cold, quiet satisfaction. Martin was the first to fall. A state prosecutor announced an indictment: identity theft, wire fraud, forgery, and attempted extortion tied to the credit schemes and threats. The clinical side went to the medical board and regulators. His business partners cut ties immediately. Contracts evaporated. Investors walked away overnight. The company he'd spent a decade building collapsed before the end of the quarter. Elaine tried to distance herself, claiming she had no idea what Martin had done. But Dana's follow-up story included screenshots of her texts, the ones where she told me I owed Tyler and called me selfish for hesitating. It included the dinner photos, the GoFundMe posts, and recordings of phone calls where she pressured me to do the right thing. The nonprofit she ran issued a statement calling her actions unconscionable and accepted her resignation under pressure. She was out of work before the week was over. Then came Tyler's downfall. The DUI case spiraled beyond anything the family expected. The victim's injuries were permanent: spinal damage, partial paralysis. A civil suit demanded millions. By then, the felony counts were locked in. His plea deal meant probation was off the table. He was facing real prison time. Elaine showed up again, this time at the cafe where Marcus and I met for lunch every week. She looked worse than before, like someone who hadn't slept in days. She asked, "Can we talk?" Marcus moved his chair closer to mine. "You don't have to listen." I nodded anyway. 5 minutes. She sat down slowly, hands trembling. "I know you hate me," she said, "and I deserve that. But you've made your point. Please, please stop." "Stop what?" I asked. "This campaign, the interviews, the lawsuits. You're killing what's left of our family." I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. "There's no family left to kill. Josh, I'm begging you." "Begging me?" "You begged me once before. Remember? The night before the surgery. You begged me to do the right thing. You cried and told me Dad would be ashamed. And now you want me to stop because you're uncomfortable?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I never meant for it to go this far. It went this far the second you decided my body was your property." She tried to reach for my hand. Marcus stopped her with a firm shake of his head. She stood, defeated, and left without another word. A few days later, Dana called. "The state's attorney's office wants to speak with you," she said. "They're building a broader case: coercion, medical fraud, maybe even conspiracy." The meeting was in a sterile government office downtown. 2 prosecutors and an investigator asked me to walk them through everything again. Every threat, every forged document, every lie. They were particularly interested in the evaluation consent paperwork and Martin's calls to my former employer. When the meeting ended, one of the prosecutors said quietly, "What happened to you isn't just unethical. It's criminal, and we're going to prove it." It wasn't vengeance, it was justice. And for the first time, it didn't feel hollow. News stations began calling me a whistleblower. Advocacy groups reached out. One invited me to speak at a panel on medical autonomy. Another wanted to consult with me about new legislation. I said yes to both. The first event was a small conference in Milwaukee. I told my story to a room of 200 people: doctors, lawyers, and survivors. I spoke about coercion and consent, about the subtle ways power is used to trap people, and about how easily family can become a weapon. When I finished, they stood and applauded. A week later, I testified before a state legislative committee considering a bill to tighten consent laws for living organ donation. My hands shook as I spoke, but I didn't care. I wasn't speaking for sympathy anymore. I was speaking for change. Martin tried to contact me once, through a lawyer. The letter claimed that I had defamed him and caused irreparable reputational harm. My lawyer sent back a box of evidence: forged accounts, recorded threats, and signed consent forms. They never contacted me again. Tyler didn't try at all. He was out on bail, confined to a small apartment, and awaiting trial. I heard from Dana that he'd been offered a plea deal that included prison time and restitution payments. The boy who once called me spare parts was about to lose everything too. The last time I saw Elaine was outside the courthouse after one of Martin's hearings. She stood across the street, holding a folder and staring at me like she was waiting for something. An apology, forgiveness, anything. I turned and walked away. There was no forgiveness to give. A year after everything imploded, Chicago felt like a different city. Maybe it was me who'd changed. The same streets I used to walk with a knot in my stomach now felt open. Every step away from them had loosened the weight I'd been carrying since the surgery. Martin was gone, not physically, but in every way that mattered. His company had dissolved, his reputation was in ashes, and the fraud charges turned into a conviction. He took a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence and was serving 3 years in a minimum security facility. The man who once lectured me about responsibility now spent his days in a prison library filing appeals that no one cared about. Elaine's life was quieter too. After resigning from the nonprofit, she tried applying to other charities and foundations, but no one would touch her. Word about what she'd done followed her everywhere. I heard through mutual contacts that she now worked part-time at a small thrift shop and lived alone in a cramped apartment on the south side. The house she once bragged about sold in a foreclosure auction. Tyler pleaded guilty to aggravated DUI causing injury, real prison time, and restitution. After he got out, he worked a warehouse night shift as a condition of probation. I didn't take pleasure in their misery, but I didn't pity them either. Their lives looked like what they'd earned. My own life was nothing like I had pictured 2 years earlier. And in some ways, that was a good thing. I still lived in the small apartment Marcus helped me secure, but I was hardly there. Most weeks, I was on the road, speaking at universities, conferences, and advocacy events about medical consent and coercion. The podcast Marcus and I started, The Line, had grown beyond anything we expected. Each episode focused on stories like mine, people who'd been pressured, deceived, or manipulated by those closest to them. Some stories were about organ donation. Others were about finances, healthcare decisions, even custody battles. The message was always the same. You are allowed to say no. We had sponsors now, a small production team, and a loyal audience. But the best part wasn't the success. It was the messages we received. People wrote to tell us that hearing my story helped them recognize abuse in their own lives. Some said they walked away from toxic families. Others said they finally sought legal help. It felt like everything I had endured was building towards something bigger than revenge. One afternoon, I got a call from Seth, Tyler's lawyer, asking if I'd be willing to meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The meeting was short and tense. Tyler didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't apologize. He only said, "I hope you're okay," and that he was trying to get his life together. It was hollow, but it was something. Elaine tried writing letters. I never responded. Most were filled with excuses, how she thought she was doing the right thing, how she'd lost everything, how she wished we could start over. I didn't need to read more than a few lines to know that wasn't possible. One morning in late spring, I received a letter that was different. It was short, handwritten, and almost hesitant. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a reply. But I need you to know that I understand now. I understand that I didn't just take a kidney from you. I took your trust, your autonomy, and your future. And if the only thing I can do now is stay away, then I will. I folded it and put it in a drawer. It wasn't closure, but it was enough to stop the anger from twisting deeper. A few weeks later, I stood in a small cemetery on the edge of the city, a place I hadn't visited in years. The breeze was cool, the air heavy with spring rain. I stared at the headstone with my father's name etched into it. "Hey, Dad," I said quietly. "It's been a while." I told him about the job I lost, the surgery, the lawsuit. I told him about Marcus, the podcast, the advocacy work. And I told him that I was okay. Not healed, not perfect, but okay. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket and placed it at the base of the stone. On it, I'd written the only words that still mattered. They took my choice, but they didn't take my future. As I walked away from the grave, I didn't look back. There was nothing left behind me worth clinging to. The pain wasn't gone. It probably never would be, but it didn't define me anymore. I had turned it into something else, something that mattered. And for the first time since the day I woke up in that hospital bed, the future felt like mine. Not because I'd forgiven them, not because justice had been served, but because I had reclaimed the one thing they had stolen: control over my own life. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.